The roar simply stopped. For 12,000 years, 3,000 tons of crushing water plunged over the sheer cliff every single second. A natural force so powerful it created its own weather system. And then, in the summer of 1969, the water was gone. Not reduced, gone. But draining a wonder of the world didn't just reveal dry rock. It exposed a graveyard. Down in the lethal hidden depths, they would uncover millions in forgotten treasure. They would find 2 hidden bodies trapped in the stone. And worst of all, they would trigger a massive geological ticking time bomb that threatened to destroy the American Falls forever. You don't just turn off a waterfall like a kitchen faucet, but someone did. Just days before the silence, an army of men and heavy machines descended on the raging river above the drop. Over 3 agonizing days, truck after truck backed up to the lethal surging current. They dumped 28,000 tons of earth and stone directly into the rapids. They were fighting one of the most violent rivers on the planet. The United States Army Corps of Engineers was building a 600-foot cofferdam. Their mission? Choke the Niagara River, force millions of gallons of water to reroute entirely to the Canadian side. When the final load of rock was dropped, the impossible happened. The riverbed drained, the mighty falls slowed to a trickle, and then died completely. Engineers and hardhats stepped out onto the damp, exposed riverbed. They were walking where, just hours before, anyone would have been instantly ripped apart by the current. It was the same summer Apollo 11 went to the moon. While astronauts walked on dead rock in space, these men were walking on the dead rock of Niagara. They thought they were there for a simple structural assessment. They were wrong. Because when you drain a 12,000-year-old river, it forces the water to surrender its secrets. The first discovery was almost magical. Millions of coins glinted in the sunlight, trapped in the deep crevices of the riverbed. A fortune in pennies, nickels, and dimes tossed into the roaring water by generations of tourists wishing for luck. For a brief moment, it was a literal treasure hunt. A carpet of forgotten history suddenly brought out of the dark. But as the crews ventured closer to the deadly edge, the illusion of safety vanished. When they looked down, they didn't just see a dry river. They saw the corpse of a dying waterfall. At the base of the cliff was a colossal, chaotic graveyard of broken boulders. Some of these rocks were the sizes of houses. Erosion had been eating away at the soft shale beneath the hard limestone cap, causing massive chunks of the cliff face to shear off and crash to the bottom. The American Falls were slowly turning into a giant rocky ramp. The sheer, terrifying drop was disappearing. The engineers had stopped the water to clean up nature's mess. Their master plan was to bring in heavy machinery, blast that mountain of debris into dust, and haul it away. It sounded like a straightforward engineering feat, but they were about to realize they were not in control. Down in the jagged, slippery rocks, where the pounding water usually annihilated everything it touched, searchers spotted something unnatural. Not coins, not rocks. 2 bodies. A man and a woman trapped in the stone. No one knew who they were. No one knew how long they had been crushed beneath the white water. The sudden draining had forced the river to give up its dead. It instantly changed the atmosphere on the dry rock. This wasn't just a construction site anymore. It was an active, hostile environment that had already claimed lives. The men mapping the riverbed were suddenly hyper-aware that they were tethered to flimsy steel lines. One slip on the slick, algae-covered rock meant a fatal plunge. But the physical danger to the men on the ground was nothing compared to the apocalyptic threat hiding inside the rock itself. To figure out how to safely dynamite the boulders at the bottom, crews began drilling deep core samples into the cliff face. As the drill bits chewed into the rock, the data coming back was catastrophic. The entire cliff face was a ticking time bomb. The bedrock wasn't solid, it was riddled with massive, hidden fractures. Deep, unstable geological faults spiderwebbed directly through the rock, holding up the riverbed. The structural integrity of the American Falls was a complete illusion. The engineers froze. If they used dynamite to clear the boulders at the base, the shockwaves wouldn't just break up the debris, the vibrations would travel straight up into those hidden fractures. If they lit those fuses, they risked collapsing the entire face of the American Falls in one catastrophic event. The very act of trying to save the waterfall was going to destroy it. The project ground to a halt. The engineers were trapped in an impossible standoff. They thought modern engineering could fix a broken mountain. Now, they were standing on a fragile shelf of fractured stone, holding back an ocean of water with a temporary pile of dirt. Realizing they were completely powerless. On one side, perfectionists demanded they risk the explosives. They wanted to drill massive steel cables deep into the bedrock to artificially hold the cliff together. They wanted to play God. On the other side, geologists warned that attempting to freeze the falls in time with steel and concrete would trigger the exact collapse they were trying to prevent. For months, the falls sat completely dry as the clock ticked. A glaring, ugly construction site. We could send men to the moon, but a crumbling pile of wet rock was defeating the best minds in the country. Finally, backed into a corner, they made the only choice they could. They surrendered. The risk of total collapse was simply too high. They decided to leave the boulders exactly where they were, to let the rocks fall, to let the river destroy the cliff just as it had for 12 millennia. It was time to get out of the way. November 1969, the freezing winter wind whipped across the dry riverbed. Crews began tearing into the cofferdam. Shovel by shovel, the barrier was breached. At first, it was just a trickle, a dark, muddy line of water snaking its way across the dusty stone. Then, the river took over. With an earth-shaking roar, millions of icy water violently reclaimed the cliff. The white mist exploded back into the sky. The terrifying, beautiful power of the falls had returned, instantly obliterating the footprints, the drill holes, and the brief, strange silence of that summer. The American Falls were alive again. Today, when you stand at the railing and feel the mist on your face, you are looking at an illusion. It looks permanent. It looks like it has always been exactly this way. But beneath that roaring curtain of white water lies a fractured, crumbling cliff, and the memory of the men who walked along its dry edge, realizing that even the most permanent things on Earth aren't permanent at all. The falls are still dying, slowly, inch by inch. And one day, the water will stop again. But next time, we won't be the ones who stopped it.